Hello viewers, welcome back to our series of lectures on chemical bonding. In today's session, we will take up bonding in metals or metallic bonding as it is called. The session is planned as follows, that is, to begin with, we will briefly review what we have done so far in the previous sessions. Thereafter, we will try to recall the properties of metals. Having done that, we will come down to metallic bonding, what kind of bonding takes place in metals. And in this process, we will talk about the three different approaches to metallic bonding, that is electron-C model. We will briefly touch upon the valence bond ideas, and then we will spend time on the molecular orbital or the band theory about metallic bonding. And towards the end, we will sum up what we do in today's session. Okay, let us review what we have done so far. What we have done so far is, we started by revisiting the basic aspects of crystalline solids in the previous session, and then thereafter we outlined the salient features of the structures of ionic solids, and thereafter we moved on to describing the characteristic structures for ionic solids of AX type. Having done that, we brought in the concept of radius ratio and explained the radius ratio rules and discussed their application and also their limitations in the process. And then thereafter we took up the meaning of lattice defects and discussed different types of lattice defects in crystalline solids over there. Okay. So, with that what we have done so far, let us move on to the bonding in metals. And before we start with bonding in metals, let us recall what are the basic properties of metals. You will recall from your earlier understanding of metals that metals basically are lustrous, that is they shine, have high melting points, and also they are malleable and ductile, that means you can beat them into sheets or pull them into wires, or they also have got good electrical and thermal conductivities, and also they have got low electronegativities and they readily form positive ions. So, the typical properties of metals. Now, to understand these properties of metals, let us see what kind of bonding is there in metals. And in order to get into that, let us take one more aspect over here, that is, let us recall that when we talked about the close packed structures of metals, we realized that sodium metal crystallizes in BCC structure having a coordination number of 8, whereas magnesium metal gets into hexagonal close packing with a coordination number of 12, and aluminum gets into structure of CCP type again with a coordination number of 12. Now, the question arises that how do we get, what kind of bonding is there between different kind of atoms which are together in a metal. We can understand here that the localized electron pair bonds, what we learnt in case of valence bond theory and things like that, is not possible here, because what we see is that there are insufficient valence electrons. In case of sodium, there is only one valence electron, magnesium has got 2, aluminum has only 3. So, how do we reconcile with this, that such a few number of valence electrons and there are so many bonds to be made if all these atoms are bonded together? That is, we cannot have localized bonding. So, what is the way out? The way out is that maybe the valence electrons of large number of atoms are collectively shared. That means, we have got a different way of looking at metal structure, wherein we try to envisage, try to bring in the idea that a large number of atoms are put together and their electrons are shared collectively. And this process is facilitated by the fact that the atoms are close packed structures, because because of this close packing, this kind of a delocalized sharing of electron is facilitated over there. Okay, that is very, very important here. Now, let us see what are different approaches to metallic bonding. We have three broad approaches. The first one, a very simple one, is called as electron-C model. The second is valence bond approach or valence bond ideas, because this actually does not serve much of a purpose, but we will try to talk a little about it so that for the completeness of argument over here, and then we will take up the molecular orbital or the band theory, which is the most promising approach to metallic bonding. Let us take up the simple electron-C model first. As the name suggests, we are talking about electron-C model. As per this model, basically what is envisaged is that the valence electrons of all the atoms in the metal, they are delocalized as a form of a sea of electrons, and the remaining part of the metal atom, that is the nucleus and the core electrons over there. So, they form what is called as a positive kernel or the cation part of it, or they are also called as ion cores. So, they are arranged in the form of a very organized pattern in kind of an array or a lattice in the electron sea over there. Now, in this model, the electrostatic attraction between the electrons and the cations. So, that electrostatic attraction basically is what is called as a metallic bond. It is not a localized bond, it is a delocalized thing over there. Further, this attractive force retains the electrons in the metal, because electron see it is not flowing see, electrons are there, but there is a positive kernels in that. These positive kernels hold the electrons over there. Electrons do not leave the metal, they stay in there, and that attraction constitutes what is called as a metallic bond. On the other hand, the free electrons, they act as a glue which holds the ion cores together. So, it is a mutual kind of holding each other. The ion core there, that holds the electrons, and electrons hold the metal core over there, and that is what is called as a metallic bond. Now, these metallic bonds are non-directional. So, they exist even in the molten state. It is very, very important, because we know that many properties of the metals, they exist in the solid state as well as in the molten state. So, since these metallic bonds are non-directional, so they will exist even in the molten state, and the properties will be retained over there. So, it is a very positive aspect of this particular model there. Okay. Now, the electrons are highly mobile, and no individual electron is confined to any cation. That is very, very important, because when we say that it is a delocalized bonding, now the electron belongs to the metal as a whole. This mobility of the electrons in the electron sea model, that actually accounts for the electrical conductivities of metals. We shall be seeing that in a short while from now. Now, okay, let us move further and see that how does this electron sea model explain the properties of metals. First, let us talk about the malleability and ductility. It is very simple. Actually, what happens is that ability of metal ions to change positions within the electron sea without breaking any specific bond, that is what facilitates malleability. So, basically when you talk about any molecule per se, and what we are familiar with, say water molecule or any methane molecule or any other molecule for that matter, we have got directional bonds over there, whereas in case of metals the bonding is not directional, it is delocalized kind of a bonding there. So, if any metal ion is removed from a given place, it does not have to break any bond per se, just that the ion cores can move along, and as a consequence very comfortably we can beat the metal sheet metal into a sheet or pull it up into a wire, that is the malleability and ductility. Further, even the thermal conduction is very straightforward there. What happens is, suppose you have got a metal here, so there is an electron sea and the metal cores are there. So, and suppose I try to heat one side of the metal, what will happen? The heat energy which we are trying to give it as an input, that will introduce the collision, that means some kind of a vibrations between in the metal ions there. So, these vibrating metal ions will transfer their energy to by successive collision to the neighboring metal ions, and in this process the energy will be transmitted through the metal and the other end will become hot there. So, that is thermal conduction. Very comfortably or very conveniently we can explain thermal conduction with the help of electron sea model. Further, even electrical conduction is very, very straightforward. So, again the mobility of electrons under the influence of applied field is the one which causes electrical conduction. Let us look at this. So, what we have is, we have got this metal here, right here, and what happens is, suppose I try to apply a potential along this metal here, and when I try to connect it to a battery or so, we are trying to give an input of electrons from one end, and these electrons will push electrons from the inside and they will come out from the other side. That means there will be a conduction there, that is electrical conductivity. Very comfortably or very conveniently we can explain with the help of this electron sea model. Okay. Now, however, though this model is very simplistic model and does explain a few properties, but it is inadequate to explain the metallic luster. There is no way we can explain the luster, the shiningness of the metal with the help of electron sea model, and also it is inadequate to explain the trend in the bond strengths or the melting point. Suppose you take at different metals there, so how do the melting points change? So, that kind of a variation or the trends in melting points cannot be explained with the help of electron sea model. So, that is an inadequacy, though all said and done this is a very simplistic model there. Okay. Let us move further and take up another model here, that is called as valence bond model or valence bond ideas. Basically, this has actually not served a good purpose over there, but for the sake of completeness, we will try to touch upon it. You will recall that according to valence bond theory, basically the valence atomic orbitals of the bonding atoms having unpaired electrons in them, they approach each other and overlap. And when they overlap, the charge density in the internuclear region increases, and it is this charge density which holds the two nuclei together, and we say a bond is formed. That is a simpler way of looking at the valence bond approach there. But now the question comes is that when you try to apply this valence bond ideas to metals, what do we achieve? What we see is that suppose I want to talk about lithium metal. In case of lithium, we know that lithium has got BCC structure having a coordination number of 8, and we also know that each lithium has got that means according to this coordination number, each lithium ion has got 8 nearest neighbors and 6 next nearest neighbors there. The question comes up is that lithium has only one valence electron. With one valence electron, how can it form so many bonds there? It can just form only one bond, because as per the valence bond theory, an atom with a one valence electron can form only one bond with another atom there. So, how do we reconcile with this kind of a BCC structure? It is not possible there. One approach which was proposed by Pauling was that we can think of some structures of this kind. All these white spheres here are indicative of lithium atoms over there. So, what can happen is these two lithium atoms can bond together, so can these two, so can these two, so can these two. So, we have an arrangement of lithium atoms together and they are bonded in pairs over there. That is one possibility, or we can have an alternate arrangement of this kind, wherein these two are bonded, so are these two, and so on and so forth. So, this is one another arrangement of lithium atoms bonded together. Or there may be a possibility that we can have situation of this kind, that these two lithium atoms are bonded together, and in this case these 3 lithium atoms are bonded together, and what happens is that this becomes lithium minus there. That means some kind of a charge separation comes into play, and then we got a triatomic species over there, or we can have a situation of this kind, that there is a lithium cation over there. So, there are different arrangements possible there. So, what we see is that in case of lithium, now it is proposed by Pauling that in any metal different structures are possible, wherein different metal atoms are bonded together in variety of ways there, and more the structures, greater is the stability there. So, that is one simple proposition what we had, and Pauling further said that the true structure of the metal actually is a combination or the mixture of all the possible structures, which we can write as shown over here for lithium metal there. Okay. Now, if we move further on this, if I look into the elements of second and third group, we find that they have got more valence electrons, say, and accordingly there will be more bonds there, and since there are more bonds, there are most likely that there will be more structures there. When there are more structures, there will be more cohesive energy, or in other words, it means that since there is more cohesive energy, they will be having higher melting points over there. So, we can rationalize the melting points of the metals in terms of this basic arguments, that how many valence electrons are there in the metal atom, how many bonds can it form, how many possible structures are there, and accordingly there is more cohesive energy in them. But that is one way of looking at it. And in addition to that, what we see is that when we try to kind of invoke charge structures, and these charge structures what I showed here for the lithium metal there, that there is a triatom there with an anion there, or there is a lithium cation there. So, these charge structures probably can be used to explain the electrical conduction in metals there. So, they are the basic trivial valence bond ideas, but what we find is that this model did not work very well, because this approach cannot explain the luster, that is the shiningness of the metals, the thermal conduction, there is no way we can do that, and also it does not explain how does it happen that in the molten state also the metals retain their properties. So, all these aspects are the drawbacks of the valence bond approach to bonding in metals there. So, this brings us to the next approach, or the modern approach, or the most kind of pertinent approach about bonding in metals, what is called as the molecular orbital theory or the band theory. To understand this, let us try to recall what we learnt earlier, that in case of molecular orbital theory, the atomic orbitals that means when the two atoms are combining together, the constituent atomic orbitals they combine to give rise to molecular orbitals, and these molecular orbitals are delocalized over the whole molecule, and the molecular orbitals, these molecular orbitals are obtained by linear combination of atomic orbitals. That means, the atomic orbital of atom 1, atomic orbital of atom 2, the two will combine together to give you two molecular orbitals. One will be bonding, one will be anti-bonding. I am sure that you will be able to recall for yourself that we have done all these aspects earlier in much details over there. Further, we see that when n atomic orbitals combine, they give rise to n molecular orbitals. I am just trying to look kind of recall only the salient features of molecular orbital theory, which I want to use for today's argument over here. Okay. Now, one more thing which we will recall about molecular orbital theory is that when the atomic orbitals combine according to linear combination of atomic orbitals, the two atomic orbitals which are combining should have comparable energy, have similar symmetry about a molecular axis, and also should have as much as possible overlap between each other. So, they are the three basic requirements for the atomic orbitals to combine according to LCAO. And lastly, once we have got different molecular orbitals, the electrons available in the atoms here, they distribute themselves amongst these molecular orbitals in the order of increasing energies, and also we have to adhere to the Pauling principle and Hund's rule. Now, let us see that how do we extend all these basic ideas about molecular orbital theory to metals there, and we will take the example of lithium, and let us try to see that we can let us imagine lithium metal to be a very large molecule made up of a large number of lithium atoms over there. And what we will try to see here is that as I try to build up this lithium metal by combining one atom at a time to make a large array of lithium atoms, what do I get according to molecular orbital theory? Now, suppose I am thinking of lithium 2, a diatomic molecule there. Now, in case of lithium, we know that atomic configuration, the electronic configuration is 1s2, 2s1, that is there is only one valence electron in the 2s orbital there. Now, when the two lithium atoms combine together, they will give rise to two molecular orbitals. One will be a bonding molecular orbital, one will be an anti-bonding molecular orbital, and there will be 1s orbital somewhere down here, which we are not considering here because they are the core orbital which do not contribute to the bonding there. So, we consider only the valence electrons there. Okay. Now, if I extend further and try to talk about a triatomic molecule, lithium 3. In case of lithium 3, since there are 3 lithium atoms, each one of them will contribute one orbital there. So, 1s here, 2s here, 2s here, 2s here. So, 3 atomic orbitals are combining together. So, they will give rise to 3 molecular orbitals there. One will be bonding, one will be anti-bonding, and one will remain as non-bonding here. Non-bonding will have the same energy as the initial 2s orbital over there. Let us go further. Think of lithium 4. In case of lithium 4, since there are 4 atomic orbitals combining now, one each from each lithium atom, I will get 4 molecular orbitals. 2 of them will be bonding, 2 of them will be anti-bonding there. Going further, say lithium 5, 2 bonding molecular orbital, 1 non-bonding and 2 anti-bonding there. Lithium 6, 3 bonding, 3 anti-bonding, and so on and so forth. We can continue doing that. When I continue doing that and take a large number of lithium atoms, what do I get? What do I get is, say lithium n, when n is very large, maybe 1000, 2000, 20,000, whatever big number you can think of. So, what will happen is, so when this number is very large, I will get a, since there are n atomic orbitals combining together, I will get n molecular orbitals over there. And out of this n molecular orbitals, n by 2 will be bonding molecular orbitals and n by 2 will be anti-bonding molecular orbitals. Now, if I look at this molecular orbital, so the very first here, this will be the most bonding molecular orbital, wherein all atomic orbitals will be combining in a constructive way, and this the highest possible energy here, this molecular orbital will correspond to what is the highest anti-bonding or the most anti-bonding molecular orbital, wherein so the atomic orbitals will be combining in the most destructive way possible there. Okay. Now, once we have got these molecular orbitals, let us go further and see that since I have combined n molecular orbitals, I have combined n atomic orbitals, I have got n molecular orbitals there, n by 2 are bonding, n by 2 are anti-bonding. And now, if I try to look at the molecular orbital configuration of these lithium molecules, what do I get? I will start again from simple lithium 2. Let us look at it. In case of lithium 2, I have only 2 electrons and both of them will occupy this bonding molecular orbital and this will remain empty over there. For lithium 3, 2 will be in the bonding molecular orbital, 1 will be in the anti-bonding, lithium 4, all these 4 will be in the bonding molecular orbital. I will continue doing that. When I continue doing that, for lithium n, when a large number is there, say n electrons are to be filled, they will fill this n by 2 molecular orbitals which are bonding there, and these n by 2 molecular orbitals which are anti-bonding, they will remain empty, and this gives rise to what is called as a band structure. Let us look at it. So, this set of molecular orbitals which I have got here, that is called as an energy band, and the energy difference between the most bonding molecular orbital and the most anti-bonding molecular orbital, this is called as band width, and this band width actually depends on the strength of the interaction between atomic orbitals there. That means, the atomic orbitals which are combining, how strongly do they combine with each other, that will determine what is that band width over there. Stronger the interaction, larger the band width. This has very important implication, as we shall see in a short while from now. Okay. Now, with this as a background, let us see how do I explain conduction in case of lithium. In case of lithium, what we just saw, that we have got an energy band over there, and in this energy band, half of the molecular orbitals here, which is shown by green over here, they are valence band there, and in this valence band, this is all molecular orbitals are filled over there, and these, the shown in red here, it is called as the conduction band, and these are the molecular orbitals which are empty over there, and there is hardly any difference between energy difference between the most, that is highest occupied molecular orbital there and lowest unoccupied molecular orbital there. The band gap, so to say, is negligible over there, which means that any small amount of energy given to the electrons in this molecular orbital there along this border point here will easily get into the conduction band. Once it gets into conduction band, it can start conducting over there. So, that is how I explain the conduction in case of lithium there. Okay. Now, so in this conduction band, the electron has got high mobility, and this high mobility can explain the thermal as well as the electrical conduction in case of metals or in case of lithium per se in this particular example here. Let us see how do we explain thermal conduction in case of lithium here. So, if I heat one end of the metal, the electrons will gain energy and move into the conduction band. That means, essentially in case of lithium, first half, that is n by 2 molecular orbitals, which are the bonding molecular orbitals, they are filled, the electrons are in that. If I give little energy to that, this part of some of these electrons will get promoted to the conduction band, and in this conduction band, which extends over the whole molecule, because we know that molecular orbitals are delocalized over the whole molecule. So, this will be extended over the whole crystal over there, and as a consequence, these electrons will move all along the crystal, and in the process they will carry the heat energy or energy with them, and that is how do we call it as the thermal conduction being explained by this particular model over there. As we just mentioned, the electrons in the conduction band, they travel rapidly to other parts of metal and make them hot. So, that is how thermal conduction can be explained in terms of the band theory there. Okay, let us move a little further and see that how do we explain electrical conduction. In case of electrical conduction, as we just mentioned earlier also in case of thermal conduction, with little energy the electron will move from the valence bond to conduction band, same as in the case of thermal conductivity. And once it comes over there, and suppose there is no field, suppose I just have a metal and I try to give some energy to that, the electrons have come from the valence shell or valence band to conduction band, but these electrons are free, they are moving around on all possible directions, it does not constitute current per se. But if I apply some potential along the metal, then under the influence of this potential, these electrons move in a given direction, they move to the appropriate electrodes over there, and as a consequence the electrical conductions come into play there. So, in the absence of an applied field, there is no conduction, because electrons have moved up there into conduction band, but they are moving randomly. When you talk about electrical conduction, we expect the electrons to be moving in a given direction over there. So, that directionality will come only when we apply the field on that. Okay. Now, let us look at the molecular orbital bands for other metals. And when you go to other metals, because lithium or sodium etc., they are very simple metals because they got only one valence electron or one valence shell, typically happens to be the s orbital over there. But when we come to other metals, what happens? We find that things become a little complicated, because other metals have got more than one type of atomic orbitals on each atom, which can be considered for the bonding here. And each type of orbital will give rise to its own band over there. Say 2s will combine with 2s to give a 2s band there. 2p's will combine together to give a 2p band there. So, s orbitals will give their own band, p will give, d also will give another band over there. So, in case of other metals, we expect a large number of bands coming over there. And the electronic structure of metals consists of a series of bands called as band structure. That is how the term comes there. That is, in case of metals, different atomic orbitals of all these combining atoms, they combine together to give rise to a number of bands, and these molecular orbital bands constitute what is called as a band structure of the metal there. Okay. Now, let us take a simple example again, that is of beryllium there. Beryllium has got 3 atomic orbitals, 1s, 2s and 2p. Now, in this case, what kind of molecular orbitals do we expect? What we explained in case of lithium, that is when a large macromolecule of lithium is formed. So, with combination of lithium atoms one by one, what do I get? I get a large number of bands, a large number of molecular orbital which constitute a band. Okay. Now, in case of beryllium, what will happen is these atomic orbitals of different atoms will combine to give rise to 3 bands there, because one band will come from 1s orbitals, one will come from 2s orbitals and one will come from the 2p orbitals there. Further, as different atomic orbitals interact differently, that is to different extents they interact, each band has a different bandwidth and is centered at a different energy level there. We will just see that in short while from now. Let us look at the band structure for beryllium there. Now, in case of beryllium, what do we have is, say if you look at beryllium atom there, this is the energy of 1s orbital there, this is 2s and this is 2p, this is schematic diagram there. Now, when 1s orbital of large number of beryllium atoms combine together, they will give rise to a 1s band over there. Okay. Similarly, 2s orbitals will combine together to give rise to a 2s band there, and 2p's will combine to give rise to a 2p band there. Now, what we observe in case of beryllium here is, that is the 2p band orbitals here, they interact very strongly. As a consequence, the bandwidth of this 2p band is larger than the difference between the energies of 2s and 2p orbitals over there. As a consequence, what happens is that this 2p band extends in the domain of 2s here, and since the 2p orbitals this band is extended to this region over there. So, when we fill the electrons in these bands, this will be completely filled, so would be this to a good extent there. But some of these electrons which were, suppose this p orbital was not there, because beryllium is 1s to 2s2. So, all these electrons will be filled into these bands, the 1s band and the 2s band. But because of this overlapping of 2 bands there, that is 2s and 2p, we find that some of the electrons are occupied by the lower end of 2p band there, and the upper end of this 2s band becomes empty, and small amount of energy when given. So, the electrons from these highest occupied molecular orbitals, that is part of the 2s here and little region of the 2p here. So, they can get excited into the 2p band there and or these vacant bands over there, and as a consequence they will start conducting there. So, that is how do we explain the conduction in case of beryllium kind of thing, because beryllium otherwise is not expected to be conducting, because there are no free electrons in this case, because it is 1s to 2s2. So, if I got 4 electrons, both are paired up, and if I take a large number of beryllium atoms, all of them will be paired up electrons, there is no free electron and we are not expecting any kind of conduction there. But in this case, with this band approach there, we find that we can explain the conduction in case of beryllium there. Similarly, we can think of elements of third period, say sodium, magnesium and aluminum. Now, let us see that what is the band structure for elements of third period. So, this is sodium, magnesium, aluminum. So, we find that there will be different bands over there, 1s, 2s, 2p, and this is a combined band for 3s and 3p here. Similarly, here also we will talk more about it in the next session when we talk about the semiconductors. Then we will try to see that how do we go from highly conducting metals to semiconductors and insulators and things like that. We will discuss more about it in the next session over there. Now, let us see how do we explain the properties of metals in terms of band theory. We have talked about the thermal and electrical conduction in the context of lithium and beryllium and so on and so forth. So, that holds true for all metals for that matter. Going further, if I want to talk about luster part of it or the shiningness of metals, what we see is that these metals, they absorb light of different wavelengths, and as a consequence there is an excitation of valence electrons. That means, in the band structure there, so there are valence electrons, there are conduction band there. So, these valence electrons, they get excited to different extents into the conduction band over there, and when they relax down, when they come down to the lower levels there or empty orbitals over there, they give rise to they are accompanied by the emission of different wavelengths, and that is what causes the luster or the shining appearance of that. Because we found that the other two theories we discussed today, that is the electron C model and valence bond theory, both of them failed to explain luster, whereas in case of this molecular orbital approach or the band theory, we find that the shiningness or the luster of the metals can also be explained over there. Okay. Now, let us sum up what we have done today. What we have done today is that we basically started by reviewing the contents of the previous sessions, and then thereafter we outlined the properties of metals. Having done that, we explained the three approaches to metallic bonding, that is electron C model, the valence bond ideas, and molecular orbital or the band theory, and also try to rationalize the properties of metals using these theories, and we saw that which theory is comfortable in explaining which kind of property and where does it seem to be inadequate there. Now, having talked about this bonding in metals, now in the next session we will take up the discussion on semiconductors. Semiconductors, as the name suggests, are the materials which do not conduct as significantly as the metals do. So, we will see that what are semiconductors and how do we look into the band theory as we discussed for the metals, how does that apply to the semiconductors and insulators and things like that. That we shall be taking up in the next session. Thank you.